My boss fired me in front of everyone. The next day, I became his new landlord. From public humiliation to ultimate payback, everything changed overnight. When my boss, Richard, called me into the meeting room, I thought it was to discuss the project I had worked on for 3 sleepless weeks. Instead, he smirked, raised his voice loud enough for the whole office to hear, and said, "Pack your things. You're done here." My chest burned as laughter and shocked whispers echoed around me. He fired me in front of everyone, as if I were a clown for his amusement. I walked out carrying a cardboard box filled with my belongings. The sting of humiliation was sharper than the loss of my job. Richard's words replayed in my head, "Some people just don't belong in this business." That night, I couldn't sleep. Rage mixed with despair until something inside me shifted. I remembered the lease agreement I had signed just days before. A property purchase I had barely told anyone about. A property that, by pure coincidence, included the very office building where Richard strutted around like a king. The realization hit me like a thunderbolt. By tomorrow morning, Richard's kingdom would no longer be his alone. It would be mine to control. I arrived early the next morning, not to my old desk, but to the landlord's office on the top floor. The ink on the deal was barely dry. My late uncle's investment property portfolio had passed to me after months of legal wrangling. I didn't fully grasp the scope until my lawyer handed me the keys and contracts. One address leaped off the page, the same building where Richard had humiliated me. When I stepped into the lobby, the receptionist looked confused. "You don't work here anymore," she whispered nervously. I smiled, calm and deliberate. "You're right. I don't. But I do own the place now." She blinked, unsure if I was joking, until I showed her the contract. My hands didn't shake, not this time. For the first time in months, I felt steady, powerful. By noon, Richard was storming into the landlord's office, red-faced, already mid-shout. He froze when he saw me sitting behind the desk, the deed on the table, my name clear as day. "Surprise," I said softly, leaning back in the chair that now felt like a throne. Richard's face went pale, then blotchy red. He slammed the door shut behind him. "This is some kind of joke," he barked, but his voice cracked halfway through. I didn't flinch. I let the silence stretch, savoring the power shift. "It's not a joke, Richard," I said. "From now on, every time you want to keep those lights on, you'll be cutting a check with my name on it." He tried to laugh, a hollow, shaky sound. "You don't know what you're doing. You're in over your head." I pushed the folder toward him, contracts, rental agreements, maintenance schedules, everything signed and sealed. "Looks like I know enough," I replied. His hands hovered over the papers, and for the first time, he looked smaller. The arrogance that once filled every room he entered was crumbling. "You can't just," he started. "I already did," I cut him off. And it felt better than any victory I had ever imagined. That was the moment I realized humiliation can be temporary, but revenge, if served right, can last a lifetime. The news spread through the building faster than wildfire. By lunchtime, employees who had witnessed my public firing the day before were whispering in the hallways again. Only this time, the whispers carried disbelief and awe. Their tyrant boss had just discovered that his former employee now controlled the lease of his empire. I walked past familiar faces, no longer carrying a cardboard box of shame, but holding my head high. Some smiled discreetly, others avoided eye contact, afraid Richard might see. But I could feel it, the balance of power had shifted. In the break room, I overheard someone say, "Did you hear? Richard's office rent just doubled." It wasn't true, at least not yet, but the thought made me grin. Later that afternoon, I sent an official notice to Richard's company. Lease renewal terms would be renegotiated within 30 days. His secretary delivered the letter to his office, and within minutes, I heard the crash of something heavy being thrown against his wall. It was poetic. Less than 24 hours earlier, he had tossed me out like I was nothing. Now, his entire business was sitting in the palm of my hand. That evening, I sat in my new office, staring out at the city lights. The taste of revenge was sweet, but there was more to this than payback. I remembered every late night, every unpaid overtime hour, every time Richard belittled me in front of clients just to boost his own ego. I wasn't the only one he had crushed along the way. My phone buzzed with a message from Jenna, a former co-worker who had quit months ago after Richard reduced her to tears during presentation. "Is it true?" You're his landlord now." I replied with a simple, "Yes." Her response came instantly. "Finally. Karma found him." The next morning, I scheduled a private meeting with Richard. When he walked in, he looked less polished, tie crooked, eyes bloodshot. He sat across from me, without a word, waiting. "I don't want to ruin you, Richard," I began calmly. "But I will no longer tolerate the way you treat people. Things are going to change around here. Starting with you." For once, he didn't interrupt. He just sat there, jaw tight, realizing his reign of intimidation was over. Richard leaned back in a chair, trying to regain his composure, but the tremor in his fingers betrayed him. "You think owning these walls makes you powerful," he finally spat out. "I built this company from the ground up. People respect me." I almost laughed. Respect? No one respected him, they feared him. There's a difference. I folded my hands on the desk, calm as ever. "You're right, Richard. You built this company. But you forgot something. A building isn't just bricks and mortar, it's people. And people are tired of being treated like trash." For a moment, the silence was so heavy you could hear the faint buzz of the fluorescent lights. Then, quietly, he muttered, "What do you want from me?" That was the first honest question I had ever heard from him. "I want you to understand," I said, leaning forward. "You don't hold all the cards anymore. You want to keep your company here? Then you'll play by my rules. Fair contracts. Respect for employees. Transparency. If not, I'll find another tenant who knows how to treat people." His jaw tightened, but I saw the flicker of doubt in his eyes. He wasn't used to negotiating from weakness. He wanted to intimidate me, but the ground beneath him had shifted, and he knew it. When he finally left, slamming the door behind him, I stayed seated, my hands steady. I had just done what no one else dared, forced Richard to listen. But this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. The next week was chaos. Word spread to clients and partners. Some congratulated me quietly, relieved to know Richard finally had someone to answer to. Others were cautious, wondering if the company could survive under his explosive temper. One afternoon, I stopped by the cafe across the street. To my surprise, 3 employees from my old team waved me over. They looked nervous, glancing around before one of them, Mark, spoke up. "Is it true you're the new landlord?" I nodded. Their eyes lit up, but there was a weight in their expressions. "Listen," Jenna whispered, lowering her voice. "We've been wanting to tell someone. Richard's been cooking the books. Not a lot, just enough to make quarterly numbers look better. But if the board finds out, it could bring everything down." I sat back, processing her words. It explained so much, the erratic mood swings, the desperate need to control every presentation. He wasn't just arrogant, he was covering his tracks. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Mark glanced at the others before answering. "Because you're the only one he can't fire anymore. You have leverage. And honestly, we're tired of watching him get away with everything." The weight of their trust hit me hard. I wasn't just in this for myself anymore. This was bigger. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table, piles of documents spread out before me, my lawyer's number ready in my phone. I knew that going after Richard's lies could topple his empire completely. But it wasn't just about vengeance anymore. It was about justice for everyone he had humiliated, silenced, or exploited. By dawn, I made my decision. I would expose him, but I wouldn't do it recklessly. I'd play it smart, the same way he had played people for years. Only this time, the game wouldn't end in his favor. The next morning, I returned to the building with a plan. And Richard had no idea what storm was coming. I started by building a quiet paper trail. There was no drama, no viral posts, just the kind of tedious, methodical work that actually topples men like Richard. I spent mornings in the building's archives, asking to see invoices and maintenance receipts under the guise of routine landlord oversight. Afternoons were for interviews, coffee with former employees, lunch with the building manager, long phone calls that ended with promises, "If you find anything, we'll back you." Even the janitor, who knew the back routes and where people hid their cigarette stubs, became an ally after I bought him a proper winter coat. Late one evening, Jenna slipped me a folder at the subway entrance like we were characters in a spy movie. Inside were copies of expense reports with line items that didn't add up, vendor invoices that had been double paid, a memo from Richard to the CFO about creative projections. The handwriting was sloppy, desperate, the very signature he used when trying to intimidate others into silence. My pulse quickened, but I stayed calm. Rage had been useful up to a point. Now I needed precision. I arranged a meeting with my lawyer and an auditor recommended by Jenna. We went through everything with a fine-tooth comb. Every questionable entry, every altered spreadsheet, every off-book transfer became a stitch in a pattern too ugly to ignore. The auditor's face changed from professional indifference to the kind of alarm that made people lean in. "This isn't small," he said softly. "If the board sees this, they'll act, but you need proof that can't be dismissed as coincidence." So we built a case. Formal requests. Subpoena-ready copies. Witness statements signed and notarized. I didn't want to publicly humiliate Richard the way he had humiliated me. I wanted him removed cleanly, legally, in a way that left no room for his tantrums to bleed into another court of public opinion. I would let the corporate system do what it did best when fed with the right evidence. Still, there were risks. Richard was unpredictable. He had access to funds, clients, even the keys to people's livelihoods. I had already seen how his face contorted when he realized the ground beneath him had shifted. I couldn't underestimate his capacity for one last lunge. For 2 days I watched his office from the landlord's window, pretending to read, actually measuring his comings and goings. On the 3rd day, he was quieter than usual. The staff moved around him like ants avoiding a broken branch. That evening, as the building emptied, my phone buzzed. An anonymous tip, a small, nondescript email with an attachment labeled backup.zip. The sender had hidden their trail well. The IP trail bounced across 3 countries. My heart thudded. Whoever had sent it had risked a lot. I opened the file in a secure environment. Inside were scanned copies of internal memos and invoices that matched what Jenna had handed me, and something else, a final, unsent email from Richard to an external consultant requesting flexible accounting solutions for the next quarter. The tone didn't try to hide greed. It read like someone who knew they were cornered but still wanted to squeeze every last cent out of the room before it closed. The attachment was gold, the kind of raw, irrefutable material auditors salivate over. I forwarded copies with timestamps to my lawyer and the auditor. Then I called the board liaison I'd been able to reach through Gabriel, a partner at one of the firm's client companies. He agreed to present the evidence at the upcoming emergency meeting. There was a cold satisfaction in knowing the machinery of consequence had been set in motion. But as I sat back, exhausted, a new thought tightened my chest. If Richard was desperate, he wouldn't go down quietly. He might try to sabotage the evidence, or worse, retaliate against those who had confided in me. I needed to secure backups, protect witnesses, and make sure the chain of custody on every document was airtight. I rose to lock the office door and found, on the chair across from me, a single envelope with my name in Richard's rushed handwriting. No stamp, no courier, just a scrawl. My fingers hovered before I picked it up. Inside, there was a business card and 4 words that made the room tilt. "We need to talk tonight." I stared at the card, the ink still fresh enough to smudge beneath my thumb. Richard wanted a private meeting. No lawyers, no witnesses. Every instinct screamed trap, but curiosity and strategy made me hesitate. If he was reaching out like this, he was cornered. And cornered men often revealed more than they intended. I chose neutral ground, a 24-hour diner 2 blocks from the office, the kind of place with greasy menus and coffee that never ran out. I arrived early, slid into a booth facing the door, and waited. The neon sign flickered overhead, buzzing like an insect caught in a jar. Richard showed up 15 minutes late. No suit this time, just a wrinkled shirt, sleeves rolled up, tie stuffed into his pocket. He looked older, smaller, like the weight of years had finally caught up with him overnight. He sat down heavily, ordered black coffee, and stared at me without speaking. Finally, he muttered, "You got me by the throat, don't you?" I stayed quiet. Let him talk. "I know you've been digging," he continued. "I don't care how you got it, but you don't understand. If the board sees those numbers, I'm done. Not just me. Everyone here. The contracts, the investors, they'll pull out. The whole company will collapse." There it was, the plea, framed not as self-preservation, but as a threat wrapped in guilt. He wanted me to believe that exposing him meant destroying everyone else too. Classic Richard. "You've been collapsing this company for years," I replied. "I'm just the first person who's not afraid to show the cracks." He leaned forward, desperation creeping into his voice. "You want money? I'll cut you in. You want power? I'll make you partner. Just don't go to the board. I studied him, the same man who once smirked as he stripped me of my dignity in front of an entire office. Now he was bargaining like a gambler with no chips left. And still, no apology, no accountability. Just survival instinct. Richard, I said slowly, you don't get it. This isn't about me anymore. It's about everyone you've stepped on to keep yourself standing. I don't want your partnership. I want the truth to come out. For the first time, I saw fear flicker in his eyes, real fear. He clenched his jaw, threw a crumpled bill on the table, and stood. If I go down, I'm not going alone, he growled. Then he walked out into the night, leaving his untouched coffee steaming between us. I sat there long after he was gone, staring at the swirling patterns in the dark liquid. His words weren't an empty threat. Richard was planning something, and I had less time than I thought. The following morning, the building hummed with a strange tension. Employees avoided Richard's office, whispers chased down hallways, and even the receptionist barely looked up when I passed. It felt like everyone was waiting for a storm to break. I headed straight to my lawyer's office with the envelope of evidence. We made multiple encrypted copies, stored them off-site, and arranged for automatic delivery to the board if anything happened to me or the files. For the first time, I felt untouchable. That illusion shattered 2 hours later. When I returned to the building, the fire alarm blared. People poured out into the street, coughing through the haze of smoke. My stomach dropped as I saw flames licking from the windows, Richard's floor. The fire department rushed in, but the damage was done. His office, his computers, his paper trail, gone in a blaze. Arson. It had to be. Richard stood across the street, tie flapping in the wind, his face twisted into a grimace. Our eyes met, and for a split second I saw it, relief. He thought he had destroyed the evidence. I didn't move, didn't flinch, just pulled out my phone, and within his line of sight, texted the auditor, backup safe. Proceed as planned. His expression shifted instantly from triumph to panic. He knew the fire hadn't saved him. By evening, the board had convened an emergency meeting. They had my files, my witness statements, and confirmation from the auditor. Richard wasn't just facing termination, he was facing charges. But as I walked out of that building, smoke still staining the sky, I couldn't shake one thought. Richard had already proven he'd do anything to protect himself. If the fire was just the beginning, what would he try next? The board moved quickly. Within 48 hours, Richard was suspended pending investigation. His access cards were revoked, his name stripped from the company website. Watching him escorted out of the building he once ruled felt surreal. Employees stood frozen at their desks, some stunned, others quietly smiling, as if a long curse had finally lifted. But Richard didn't go quietly. He tried to paint himself as the victim of a vendetta, sending late-night emails to clients and investors claiming I had orchestrated everything out of spite. The problem for him was simple. The evidence spoke louder than his words. Every forged invoice, every cook report, every statement from those he trampled on, it all told the same story. When the news broke publicly, headlines called it the fall of a titan. Reporters camped outside the building for days, shoving microphones at anyone who might offer a quote. I avoided the cameras, but inside, I walked the halls freely, no longer as the employee who had been humiliated, but as the landlord who had seen justice served. Weeks later, sitting in my office overlooking the city, I thought about that first day, the cardboard box in my arms, the sting of humiliation, the laughter that had followed me out the door. I had believed it was the end of everything I'd worked for. I didn't realize it was the beginning. Richard's empire had collapsed, but mine was just starting. Tenants respected me. Employees whispered thank you when they passed, and the building itself seemed lighter, freer. Revenge hadn't just given me satisfaction, it had given me a new identity. I was no longer the one who was fired. I was the one who turned power upside down, who showed everyone that the tables can flip in an instant. And every time I passed Richard's old office, now empty, waiting for someone new, I smiled, remembering the lesson I'd carry forever. Never underestimate the one you try to humiliate.